Hello MBAP 516 online students. This is Dr. Jaros with a video explanation for how I graded your second exam. So let's take a look at the exam. Question number 1. If I am a vice president of marketing and I find that the managers of two departments who report to me, the GM for retail store sales and the GM for online sales, seem to frequently disagree with each other about marketing goals and policies, should I assume that the likely cause is that there is a personality conflict between them? Explain. How should I handle this issue? Explain. Well, the answer to the first part of the question is no. You should not assume that the reason for the disagreement is a personality conflict. Rather, you should assume that because the two managers represent different departments or groups within the organization, that these departments and groups may have different interests, goals, and values. And therefore, since the general managers are representatives of these departments, they embody and express these conflicting interests, goals, and values. What should you do? Well, the article mentions 3 possible methods to address conflict. The preferred method is method number 3, where the manager assumes that while conflict between groups is inevitable, agreement is possible. And the specific techniques you would use would depend on the stakes involved. If the issue is a high-stakes issue, then problem solving should be used. If it's a low-stakes issue, then peaceful coexistence or learning to live with the difference should be used. And if medium stakes issues are involved, then bargaining and negotiating to achieve a compromise should be used. All right, what about question number 2? Prisoners, despite being locked in jail cells, have been shown in studies to often be able to exercise power over prison guards, despite the fact that prison guards have formal authority to tell prisoners what to do. How can this be explained? Also, why do prisoner rehabilitation efforts often fail? Well, as indicated in the study that we read about, prisoners are able to often exercise power over prison guards by creating dependency relationships. Namely, even though prison guards have formal authority over prisoners, the prisoners realize that if they make trouble, if they act up and create trouble, then that can make the prison guards look bad. Because if a lot of reports of prisoner uprisings and misbehavior reach the warden, then that will indicate to the warden that the prison guards are not able to control their cell blocks, and that would harm the job prospects of the prison guards. So a bargaining relationship often develops whereby prisoners agree to behave themselves and not make the guards look bad, but in exchange for that, the guards agree to allow prisoners to have additional privileges that may not technically be in the rules, but the prison guards will look the other way and let the prisoners do things that they might not, actually be allowed to do. And that's because of the dependency relationship that exists between them. According to Etzioni, rehab efforts in prisons often fail because prisons rely on the use of coercive power. Guards use coercive power to control prisoners, but this makes prisoners not amenable to the normative persuasions that rehabilitation efforts involve to try to get them to become productive citizens. Basically, what Etzioni is saying is, you can't rehabilitate someone by being coercive and harsh and cruel towards them. All right, let's look at question number 3. Why is motivating employees in public sector organizations different from motivating employees in the private sector? What factors directly influence the motivation of public sector workers? Explain. Well, public sector organizations face 3 things that are different from what we typically see in the private sector. Because public sector organizations are political in nature, they often face conflicting government goals. Also, because government organizations have to follow laws and rules and procedures that private sector organizations do not have to follow. Government organizations are often hamstrung by procedural constraints, such as due process considerations. And also in public sector organizations, there is no profit motive, whereas in the private sector, a lot of the behavior that goes on in the organization is driven by the desire to make money. The factors that directly influence the motivation of public sector or workers, this comes from the model that was discussed: self-efficacy, job goal difficulty, and job goal specificity are the three factors that directly influence the motivation of public sector employees. Meaning, if self-efficacy is high, meaning if the public sector employee is confident in their ability to do the job, they will be more motivated. And if job goals are challenging, and if job goals are specific, the public sector employee will be more motivated to do a good job as well. Last but not least, discuss 2 benefits and 2 drawbacks or limitations of virtual teams. Okay? There are a lot of benefits to using virtual teams. It allows the organization to create a team with higher skill set, because with a virtual team, you can bring together people who are located in many different places around the country or even around the world. So you get a greater variety of skills and perspectives being brought to bear on the team's work. Also, team members, because they work from home, are able to be in 2 places at once, so to speak. They have access to organizational resources online, but they also have access to the resources located in their home office. Also, research shows that in virtual teams, there's less time wasted with courtesies and chit-chat in the team meeting. In other words, there tends to be a greater focus on the problems to be addressed. I just mentioned 3 reasons. You did not have to mention all 3. The question said, to talk about 2 benefits. So any 2 were sufficient. As far as limits are concerned, one limit on virtual teams is that not all work can be done virtually. If the work cannot be digitalized and transmitted electronically, then there's no way to use a virtual team. You have to use an old-fashioned face-to-face team. Also, virtual teams are subject to the same kind of interpersonal group dynamics that face-to-face teams are. In other words, conflicts, problems in communication, disagreements, and things of that nature, they can happen in virtual teams just like they happen in regular face-to-face teams. So the manager has to be aware of the need to manage those intergroup dynamics as well. All right. Well, I hope this video explanation was helpful to you in understanding the grade that you earned on your exam.